New York City, late October. The rain came down in sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office, 43 stories above the chaos of Midtown Manhattan. Each droplet caught the amber glow of the city lights below, creating a cascading wall of liquid gold that did nothing to warm the cold atmosphere inside the room. Elena Morse stood in the corner near the door, her laptop bag clutched against her chest like a shield, her eyes fixed on the polished marble floor. She could feel them staring at her. 5 men in expensive suits. Their conversations paused mid-sentence when she'd been escorted in by the building's security. The air smelled of cigar smoke and expensive cologne, a combination that made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "This is the tech expert." The voice came from behind the massive mahogany desk, dripping with disdain. Elena forced herself to look up, immediately regretting it. Dominic Caruso sat in a leather chair that might as well have been a throne, his sharp charcoal suit perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. He was maybe 40, with dark hair graying at the temples, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to cut through whatever they looked at. Everything about him radiated power and danger. "Yes, Mr. Caruso," said Vincent, the nervous IT manager who'd called her in. "Elena Morse. She's the best freelancer in the city for network security. Fixed the Rothstein firm's breach last year and I don't care about her resume, Vincent." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Elena with something between amusement and contempt. "I asked for an expert, and you brought me a librarian." The other men in the room chuckled. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, her fingers gripping the laptop bag tighter. She was used to this, the dismissive looks, the underestimation. At 28, with her oversized cardigan, wire-rimmed glasses, and hair pulled back in a messy bun, she knew she didn't look like what people expected when they thought cybersecurity expert. "Mr. Caruso, I assure you, Ms. Morse is—" Vincent tried again. "Does she talk?" Dominic interrupted, his eyes never leaving Elena. "Or did you bring me a mute?" Elena swallowed hard, forcing words past the knot in her throat. I can fix your network issues, Mr. Caruso." Her voice came out quieter than she'd intended, barely above a whisper. "Speak up, sweetheart. We can't hear you over the rain." More laughter from his men. One of them, a barrel-chested man with a scar across his eyebrow, leaned over to his companion. $5 says she runs out crying before midnight. I said I can fix your network," Elena repeated, louder this time, though her voice still shook. "Vincent said you've been experiencing server crashes and security alerts. I specialize in—" "Let me guess." Dominic cut her off again, standing up from his chair. He was taller than she'd expected, easily over 6 feet. He walked around the desk with the confident stride of someone who'd never been challenged. "MIT? Stanford? One of those fancy schools that teaches you to type fast and look terrified?" "MIT," Elena admitted quietly. "Computer science and, of course, MIT." He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, which she immediately failed to do, her gaze dropping back to the floor. "And let me guess, you graduated top of your class, but you can't handle a real office environment, so you work from your little apartment talking to computers because people scare you." The accuracy of his assessment stung more than the mockery. Elena's fingers had gone white from gripping her bag. "Mr. Caruso, if you'd prefer someone else," she started, already planning her escape. No. He waved his hand dismissively, returning to his desk. "You're here now. Vincent says you're the best, and Vincent knows I don't accept anything less than the best, even if the best apparently shops at Goodwill." Another wave of laughter. Elena's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She'd dealt with worse. Condescending professors, dismissive colleagues, tech bros who assumed she was someone's assistant. She could handle this. "Tommy, set her up in the corner by the servers," Dominic ordered one of his men, a younger guy with slicked back hair and a Rolex that probably cost more than Elena's annual rent. "Try not to scare her too much. She looks like she might faint." Tommy gestured for Elena to follow him to a small workstation that had been set up in the far corner of the expansive office. As she walked past Dominic's desk, she caught a glimpse of multiple computer monitors displaying what looked like shipping manifests, financial spreadsheets, and security camera feeds from various locations. "You touch anything except what Vincent tells you to touch and we'll have a problem," Tommy said quietly as he pulled out the chair for her. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't friendly either. "Understood?" Elena nodded, setting down her bag and pulling out her laptop. Her hands were still shaking slightly as she connected to their network using the credentials Vincent had provided. Behind her, the men resumed their conversation, as if she wasn't there, which, she supposed, was exactly how they saw her. Invisible. Insignificant. "The shipment from Newark clears customs on Friday," someone was saying. "We've got the usual inspectors on payroll, but Chen is worried about the new federal task force." "Chen worries too much," Dominic replied. "We've been moving cargo through that port for 15 years. The feds can create all the task forces they want." Elena tried to focus on the screen in front of her, on the network diagnostics she was running, but she couldn't help overhearing. It was impossible not to. They spoke openly, as if she was a piece of furniture. "What about the real estate deal in Queens?" Another voice. "Marco says the paperwork is ready to file." "Good. That property will be worth triple once the rezoning goes through. Make sure Marco keeps the city council happy." The network architecture began to load on Elena's screen, and her analytical mind automatically started cataloging anomalies. The security protocols were decent, better than she'd expected actually. Military-grade encryption on external connections, robust firewalls, segmented internal networks. Someone who knew what they were doing had set this up. But there were crashes, Vincent had said. Random server failures that couldn't be explained by hardware issues. Elena pulled up the error logs, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This was her element. Code, systems, logic. Here, she wasn't the awkward girl who couldn't make eye contact. Here, she was in complete control. "Look at her go," Tommy said with a laugh, watching Elena work. "Like a little mouse clicking away." "Mouse," Dominic repeated from his desk. "That's good. You hear that, Mouse? That's your name now." Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She was used to nicknames, to being diminished. She'd learned long ago that arguing only made it worse. Better to stay quiet, do the job, collect the payment, and leave. The hours crawled by. The men continued their meeting, discussing shipments and investments and problems with various business partners. Elena noticed that Dominic never explicitly said anything illegal, but the implications were clear enough. This wasn't just a legitimate import-export business, despite what the sign in the lobby claimed. "Not your problem," she told herself. "Fix the network. Get paid. Forget everything you heard." Around 11 p.m., the office began to empty. The men filed out one by one, some of them making jokes at Elena's expense as they passed. "Don't work too hard, Mouse. Try not to break anything." "Does she ever blink? I haven't seen her blink." Finally, it was just Dominic, Vincent, and Elena. Vincent approached her workstation nervously. "Have you found anything?" Elena pulled off her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Your network is experiencing intermittent attacks from an internal source. Someone with system access is running unauthorized queries against your main database. Looks like financial records, shipping manifests, personnel files." Vincent's face went pale. "Internal? That's impossible. Your external security is excellent," Elena confirmed, putting her glasses back on. "But whoever's doing this has legitimate credentials. They know the system architecture intimately." "Are you saying someone on staff is—" Vincent glanced nervously at Dominic, who had looked up from his own computer with sudden interest. "I'm saying someone with administrative access is extracting data," Elena clarified. "I can't tell you why or who without deeper analysis. I'd need to review user activity logs, access patterns, possibly install monitoring software to catch them in the act." Dominic stood up and walked over to her workstation. Elena instinctively leaned back in her chair as he leaned down to look at her screen. He smelled like expensive whiskey and winter air. "You can see all that from looking at error codes?" His tone had changed, still skeptical, but with a hint of actual interest. "The crashes aren't random," Elena explained, pointing at the data on her screen. "They happen when the unauthorized queries overload specific database sectors. It's actually clever. The person doing it is trying to make it look like hardware failures to cover their tracks. But the pattern is there if you know what to look for. And you know what to look for." It wasn't a question. Elena met his eyes for the first time since entering the office, finding courage in her expertise. "Yes. This is what I do, Mr. Caruso. Code doesn't lie. It tells a story if you know how to read it." Something shifted in Dominic's expression, a flicker of reassessment. "How long to find who's doing it? If you give me full system access in a few days, I can trace the activity back to a specific user account. Maybe even catch them live if they run another query." Dominic straightened up, looking at Vincent. Give her whatever access she needs. I want to know who's poking around in my systems. Sir, full administrative access is... That's reserved for... Vincent started. Did I stutter, Vincent? No, sir. I'll set it up right now. Vincent hurried to another computer to configure Elena's access credentials. Dominic returned to his desk, but Elena could feel him watching her now with a different kind of attention. Not mockery. Calculation. She'd gone from invisible to potentially useful. You can work from here or remotely, Dominic said. Whatever you need. But I want daily reports. And Mouse? He paused until she looked at him. If you breathe a word of anything you've heard in this office tonight to anyone, I'll know. And you won't like what happens next. Elena's mouth went dry, but she nodded. I understand, Mr. Caruso. Good. Now go home, you look exhausted. Vincent will send you the new credentials. Elena packed up her laptop quickly, her hands shaking again, but this time not from anxiety. She'd just been given the keys to the kingdom, access to everything, and she'd heard enough in the past few hours to know that everything included things she probably shouldn't see. As she headed for the door, Dominic called out one more time. Hey, Mouse. She turned back. You did good work tonight. Better than I expected. It wasn't quite an apology for the earlier mockery, but it was something. Elena allowed herself a small, tight smile. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. The elevator ride down felt surreal. Through the glass walls, she watched the glittering city descend around her. 43 floors of concrete and steel and secrets. What had she just gotten herself into? Her phone buzzed as she reached the lobby. An email from Vincent with her new credentials. Full administrative access to Caruso's entire network infrastructure. Every database, every server, every file. Elena stepped out into the rainy October night, pulling her cardigan tighter against the cold. The subway station was 3 blocks away, but she barely noticed the rain soaking through her clothes as she walked. Her mind was already racing ahead, thinking about the data she'd seen, the patterns in those error logs. Someone was stealing information from Dominic Caruso, someone he trusted enough to give high-level system access, and she was going to find out who. What Elena didn't know yet, couldn't know, was that the unauthorized queries she'd detected were just the surface. Deep in the code, hidden beneath layers of encryption and misdirection, was something much bigger, something that would change everything. But that discovery would have to wait until she was safe in her apartment, surrounded by her computers and code, where she was brave instead of invisible. Behind her, 43 stories up, Dominic Caruso stood at his window watching the rain, thinking about the nervous programmer who'd just walked out of his office. She'd surprised him, both with her competence and her courage in speaking up despite her obvious fear. Maybe Vincent had brought him the right person after all, or maybe he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life by giving a stranger access to his empire's digital secrets. Only time would tell. Brooklyn, 2:47 a.m. Elena's apartment was a shrine to technology and caffeine. 3 monitors glowed in the darkness of her studio, casting blue light across walls covered with whiteboards full of equations and system diagrams. Empty coffee cups formed a small city on her desk, and the remnants of Thai takeout from 2 days ago still sat in containers by the sink. She'd been home for 3 hours and hadn't stopped working. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, eyes scanning line after line of code as she dove deeper into Caruso's network infrastructure. With full administrative access, she could see everything, and what she was seeing made her forget about sleep. Forget about the rain still pattering against her window. Forget about everything except the pattern emerging on her screen. Come on, she whispered to herself, pulling up another set of access logs. Show me what you're hiding. The unauthorized queries she'd detected at Dominic's office were sophisticated, but whoever had written them had made a mistake. A tiny one, barely noticeable. They'd used a timestamp randomization function to hide the pattern of their activities, but the random seed was generated from the system clock with a predictable offset. Elena had seen it before in academic papers about data exfiltration techniques. Amateur hour, she thought, though she had to admit it was a smart amateur. She wrote a quick script to correlate the randomized timestamps with system events, then sat back and waited for it to run. The apartment was silent except for the hum of her computers and the occasional siren from the street below. 3 minutes later, her screen populated with results. Oh my God, Elena breathed. The queries weren't just pulling random data. They were specifically targeting financial transactions across multiple shell companies, each one linked to Caruso's organization through deliberately obscured ownership structures. Someone was systematically mapping every dollar that flowed through Dominic's empire, But that wasn't the shocking part. Elena pulled up a visualization tool and began mapping the money flows. Lines of connection appeared on her screen. Companies in Delaware, accounts in the Cayman Islands, real estate holdings in Miami, shipping containers moving through Newark, funds bouncing between banks in Switzerland and Singapore. And then she saw it. A ghost network. A parallel financial structure that mirrored Caruso's legitimate business operations but siphoned money away at every transaction point. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here, a percentage point there, but compounding over time into something massive. Elena's hands trembled as she ran the calculations. Her screen filled with numbers, transactions, dates going back 26 months. $3 billion, $147 million. Someone had been stealing from Dominic Caruso for over 2 years, and they'd been brilliant about it. The thefts were structured to look like legitimate business expenses: consulting fees, transport costs, insurance payments, currency exchange losses. Each individual transaction was small enough to avoid triggering audits, but together they formed a river of money flowing away from Caruso's organization into hidden accounts. Elena sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was a betrayal on a massive scale, and whoever was doing it had access to everything: passwords, account numbers, shell company structures, offshore banking protocols. This was someone in Dominic's inner circle. She should call Vincent, tell him what she'd found and let them handle it internally. That was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But Elena had heard enough in that office to know what handling it internally meant in Dominic Caruso's world. And despite his mockery, despite the way his men had treated her like she was invisible, she couldn't just hand someone a death sentence without being absolutely sure. She needed more proof, concrete evidence of who was behind it. Elena pulled up the user access logs and began cross-referencing them with the timestamps of the unauthorized queries. Each query had been executed using legitimate credentials, but there had to be a pattern: times of day, locations, network routes. The sun was rising over Brooklyn by the time she found it. All of the queries originated from the same subnet, the executive office network at Caruso's headquarters. But more specifically, they came from a single workstation. The computer logs showed the user account belonged to someone with the initials MT. Elena pulled up the personnel database. Another thing she probably shouldn't have access to, but did. She searched for employees with those initials in positions senior enough to have that level of system access. 3 results appeared. She eliminated 2 immediately. One was in logistics, the other in human resources. Neither had the kind of access needed for this level of theft. The third result made her blood run cold. Marco Tesaro, Chief Financial Officer, Dominic Caruso's consigliere, the man who'd been with the organization for 17 years, who'd been at Dominic's father's side before taking the same role with the son, the man everyone in that office last night had deferred to with respect. Elena stared at the name on her screen as the implications crashed over her. Marco wasn't just stealing money. He was positioning himself to take over. All of those hidden accounts, those shell companies, they formed a parallel empire that Marco controlled completely. And if the pattern held, he was almost ready to make his move. But there was something else in the data. Elena noticed that recent queries had started targeting different information. Not financial records, but legal documentation, federal investigation files, witness protection protocols. Marco was building a case to frame Dominic. Elena stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. She paced her small apartment, running her hands through her hair. This was so far beyond a simple network security job. She'd stumbled into the middle of a war, and now she was the only person who knew the truth. If she told Dominic, Marco would likely die. If she told no one, Dominic's empire would collapse, and who knew how many people would be hurt in the fallout. If she went to the FBI, her phone rang, making her jump. The screen showed an unknown number with a 212 area code, Manhattan. Elena stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Mouse. Dominic's voice was unmistakable, that blend of authority and barely controlled danger. I need you at the office, now. Mr. Caruso, it's 6 in the morning. I don't care what time it is. Vincent just called me. Someone accessed the executive financial records overnight. Was that you? Elena's mind raced. She'd been careful, routing her queries through standard administrative channels, but apparently not careful enough. I was following up on the unauthorized access patterns I found last night. I told you I needed to save it. Get here in the next hour, or I send someone to bring you here. Your choice. The line went dead. Elena looked at her reflection in the darkened monitor, pale, exhausted, terrified. She'd spent years avoiding confrontation, hiding behind screens and code. Now she was about to walk into a room with a man who could make her disappear with a phone call and tell him that his most trusted advisor was stealing billions and planning to destroy him. She grabbed her laptop, threw on yesterday's clothes, and headed for the door. On the subway ride into Manhattan, she tried to organize her thoughts, prepare what she would say. But every scenario ended with her in danger. The office building looked different in the harsh light of dawn. Less imposing, more ordinary. Elena badged through security with the credentials Vincent had given her, her stomach in knots as the elevator climbed to the 43rd floor. The reception area was empty, but she could see light coming from Dominic's office. She walked down the hallway on unsteady legs, her laptop bag heavy with evidence that could either save her or condemn her. Dominic was standing by the windows watching the city wake up. He turned when she entered, and his expression was unreadable. 47 minutes, he said, checking his watch. I'm impressed. Sit down. Elena sat in the chair across from his desk, clutching her laptop. The office felt different without his men filling the space. More intimate, more dangerous. Vincent tells me you accessed files you weren't supposed to see, Dominic said, walking behind his desk. Financial records, shell company documentation, offshore accounts. Want to explain why? I found something, Elena said quietly. Something you need to know about. I'm sure you did. The question is what you plan to do with that information. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. Because let me be very clear, Mouse, I like you. You're smart, you do good work. But if you think you can use what you know to blackmail me or go to the authorities, you're going to learn a very painful lesson about how the world really works. Elena took a deep breath and opened her laptop. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Mr. Caruso, I'm not trying to blackmail you, I'm trying to help you. Because someone in your organization is already destroying you and you don't even know it. She turned the laptop around, showing him the visualization she'd created, the ghost network of accounts, the flow of money, the timeline of theft. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he looked at the screen. He was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Explain. And so Elena did. She walked him through everything she'd found. The unauthorized queries, the hidden transactions, the systematic theft that had been going on for 26 months. She showed him the calculations, the offshore accounts, the shell companies that existed only to siphon money away from his legitimate operations. $3 billion, she finished quietly. Someone has stolen $3 billion from you, and they've covered it so well that your own accountants never noticed. They've been careful to make every theft look like a normal business expense. Dominic's face had gone pale, then flushed with anger. Who? Elena hesitated. This was the moment that would define everything. She could lie, say she didn't know yet, buy herself time to get far away from this situation, but she'd never been a good liar. Marco Tesoro, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your CFO. All of the unauthorized access came from his workstation using his credentials. And Mr. Caruso, there's more. She pulled up the recent query patterns. In the last 2 weeks, he started accessing different information. Legal files, federal investigation records, witness protection protocols. I think he's building a case to frame you for crimes and then take over your organization while you're in prison. The silence that followed was deafening. Dominic stared at the screen, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of his desk. Elena could see the muscles in his jaw clenching and unclenching. Marco, he finally said, his voice deadly quiet. Marco Tesoro, the man who stood beside my father for 20 years. The man I trusted to manage every dollar we made. He looked up at Elena. You're absolutely certain? The data doesn't lie, Elena said. I can show you every transaction, every access log, every piece of evidence. It all points to him. Dominic stood up and walked to the windows, his back to her. Elena could see his reflection in the glass. A man processing betrayal by his closest friend. Get out, he said suddenly. Elena's heart jumped. Mr. Caruso. Not you, I meant Marco. Get out of my sight. He turned around and Elena realized he wasn't talking to her at all. He was talking to himself, working through the implications. 17 years. He was at my father's funeral. He's godfather to my sister's kids, and all this time. He walked back to the desk and picked up his phone. Vincent, get to the office now, and bring Tony and Michael, no one else. He paused. No, don't tell anyone why, just get here. When he hung up, he looked at Elena with an intensity that made her want to shrink back in her chair. If you're wrong about this, if you've made a mistake in your analysis, I'm not wrong, Elena interrupted, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Mr. Caruso, I've spent my entire life reading code and data. This is what I do, I'm absolutely certain. Then we have a serious problem. He sat down heavily in his chair. Marco knows the location of every asset we have, every person on our payroll, every operation we're running. If he's really planning to betray me, he's had 2 years to prepare. He'll have contingencies, backup plans, probably people loyal to him scattered throughout the organization. There's something else, Elena said hesitantly. The money he's stolen. I can trace where it went. Some of it's in offshore accounts he controls, but a significant portion has been moved into cryptocurrency and distributed across thousands of digital wallets. That money is effectively untraceable now. He could liquidate it at any moment and disappear, or use it to fund a war against me. Dominic's expression was grim. How fast can you put together a complete report? Every transaction, every piece of evidence? I already have most of it compiled. I can have a full report ready in a few hours. Good, because when Vincent gets here, I'm going to need you to walk us through everything. And Mouse? He met her eyes. Once you show us this, there's no going back. You understand that? You'll be in the middle of something very dangerous. Elena thought about her quiet apartment, her simple life of freelance coding and avoiding human contact. She thought about the career she'd built on staying invisible, on never making waves. Then she thought about $3 billion stolen through code, her language, her world, twisted into a weapon of betrayal. Someone had used the thing she loved most to commit the perfect crime, and only she could prove it. I understand, she said, and I'm not going anywhere until we stop him. For the first time since she'd met him, Dominic Caruso smiled at her, not with mockery or condescension, but with genuine respect. Maybe Vincent was right about you after all, Mouse. You might not look like much, but you've got steel in your spine. Elena felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't look away this time. It's Elena, actually. My name is Elena. Elena, Dominic repeated, as if trying out the sound. All right, Elena, let's get to work. We've got a traitor to catch. Underground parking garage, 3:30 p.m. The meeting had lasted 6 hours. Elena had walked Vincent, Tony, and Michael through every piece of evidence, answered every question, demonstrated how Marco had covered his tracks. By the end, the 3 men looked shell-shocked. Now Elena stood in the parking garage next to her elderly Honda Civic, which looked ridiculous parked between Dominic's Mercedes and Tony's Escalade. Dominic had insisted on walking her to her car, saying something about security protocols that Elena didn't fully understand. You did good work today, Dominic said as they reached her car. Better than good. Vincent told me you barely slept. You worked through the night to find this. I couldn't stop once I saw the pattern, Elena admitted. It's like a puzzle. Once you see part of the solution, you need to find the rest. Most people would have called me immediately and dumped the problem in my lap. You made sure you had all the facts first. He paused. Why? Elena considered the question. Because I knew what it would mean if I was right. I couldn't just accuse someone without being absolutely certain. That's someone's life. You're worried about Marco's life? Dominic's tone was carefully neutral. After what he's done? I'm worried about making a mistake, Elena clarified. About being wrong and having that on my conscience. But I'm not wrong. The data is clear. Dominic nodded slowly. We're going to need you to stay close over the next few days. Marco can't know we're onto him. Not until we've secured our assets and isolated his supporters. Can you monitor his network activity? Alert us if he makes any unusual moves? I can set up automated alerts, Elena said. If he accesses anything sensitive or tries to move money, I'll know immediately. Good. And Elena? Dominic's voice dropped lower. Be careful. If Marco suspects you know something, you become a target. Vary your route home. Check if you're being followed. Don't open your door for anyone you don't know. A chill ran down Elena's spine. You think he'd come after me? I think $3 billion makes people desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal cell number. You see anything suspicious? Anything at all? You call me immediately. Day or night. Elena took the card, her fingers brushing his for a moment. Thank you, Mr. Caruso. Dominic, he said. If we're going to war together, you might as well use my first name. Elena got into her car, her mind reeling from everything that had happened in the last 18 hours. She'd gone from being mocked as an invisible mouse to being trusted with Dominic Caruso's most dangerous secret. As she pulled out of the garage, she checked her rearview mirror. An old habit from driving in the city, but now it felt different. Now she was looking for threats. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your apartment was accessed at 2:17 p.m. today while you were at our meeting. Front door shows signs of forced entry. Don't go home. Come back to the office. D. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Marco already knew. The game, as Dominic had said, had changed, and underestimating the quiet programmer was about to become the most expensive mistake of Marco Tesaro's life. The Hamptons, Dominic's estate. Late November. The sprawling mansion sat behind iron gates and manicured hedges, a fortress disguised as luxury. Elena watched through the car window as Tony drove past the gatehouse, security cameras tracking their progress up the winding driveway. Snow had started falling an hour ago, dusting the bare trees and perfectly maintained lawns with white. 3 weeks. That's how long she'd been living in Dominic Caruso's world now. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, a colonial-style facade with tall columns and warm light spilling from every window. It looked like something from a magazine spread, not the secret war room it had become. Home sweet home, Tony said dryly, opening her door. Boss is in the study, you know the way. Elena grabbed her laptop bag and backpack, hastily packed that first night when she'd been warned not to go home, and headed inside. The marble foyer was warm, a massive fireplace crackling at one end. She'd stopped being impressed by the wealth after the first day. Now she just saw it as Dominic's prison. Beautiful, comfortable, but still a cage built by his father's choices. She found Dominic in the study, surrounded by papers and ledgers, 3 computer monitors displaying financial data. He looked tired, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his shirt sleeves rolled up. A half-empty bottle of scotch sat on the corner of his desk. You're back, he said without looking up. How did it go? Elena set down her bag and pulled out a thumb drive. The offshore accounts in Singapore are secure now. I changed all the access credentials and routed them through new shell companies that Marco doesn't know about. He can't touch that money anymore. That's the 4th set of accounts we've locked him out of. Dominic finally looked at her, and Elena noticed the dark circles under his eyes. How much have we secured total? 1.7 billion, Elena said, plugging the drive into one of his computers. Which means Marco still controls about 1.4 billion in assets we haven't found yet. Dominic poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. He's been quiet, too quiet. No unusual network activity, no attempts to access the accounts you've locked. Either he's planning something or he already planned it, Elena finished. She pulled up a chair next to him close enough to share the screen. Over the past 3 weeks they'd fallen into this rhythm, late nights working side by side, mapping Marco's empire piece by piece. The mockery from that first night seemed like it had happened to different people. I've been thinking about that. Marco's smart. He wouldn't build something this elaborate without multiple contingency plans. So what's his endgame? Dominic leaned back, studying the ceiling. If he knows we're onto him, and he must know by now, what's his move? Elena had been asking herself the same question. She pulled up a timeline she'd been building, mapping every action Marco had taken over the past 26 months. Look at the pattern. He didn't just steal money randomly. Every major theft coincides with a significant business decision you made. She pointed at the screen. Here, you expanded operations in Newark. Marco skimmed 2% off every transaction. Here, you bought the real estate portfolio in Queens. Marco inflated the purchase price and pocketed the difference. He's been using your own growth against you. Parasite, Dominic muttered, feeding off the host while pretending to help it grow. But that's not the concerning part. Elena zoomed in on the most recent data. In the last 2 months, he's changed tactics. He's not stealing anymore, he's repositioning assets. Moving money into legitimate businesses, real estate, investments that would survive even if your organization collapsed. Dominic sat forward. He's preparing for the aftermath. Exactly. He's building a post-war empire, which means the war is coming soon. Dominic drained his glass. How soon? Elena pulled up another file, the one that had kept her awake for the past 3 nights. I hacked into Marco's personal email. I know I shouldn't have, but I needed to. Elena. Dominic's hand covered hers on the mouse, stopping her nervous rambling. I stopped judging your methods when you saved me from losing everything. What did you find? The touch surprised her. Not threatening, almost protective. Elena had noticed these small changes over the past weeks. The way Dominic listened when she talked now, really listened. The way he'd started asking her opinion on decisions beyond just technical matters. The way he sometimes smiled at her observations about his men, her outsider's perspective on his world. She cleared her throat, refocusing. Marco's been in contact with federal prosecutors. Not directly. He's using a lawyer as an intermediary, but the timeline suggests he's negotiating a deal. A deal, Dominic repeated flatly. Let me guess. Immunity, in exchange for testimony. And evidence. He's been compiling documentation about your operations. Not the legitimate businesses, the other stuff. Shipments that aren't quite legal. Payments to officials, connections to organized crime families. Elena pulled up email after email, each one another piece of Marco's betrayal. He's building a federal case against you while simultaneously stealing your money. When you go to prison, he takes over everything through the legitimate corporate structures he's established. Dominic stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, snow fell heavier now, blanketing the estate in white. My father trusted him, made him promise to look after me after he died. And this is how he honors that promise, by destroying everything we built. Elena heard the pain beneath the anger. She stood up, moving to stand beside him at the window. For what it's worth, I don't think this was always his plan. The data shows he was loyal for 15 years. Something changed 26 months ago. What changed? You did. Elena pulled up another file on her tablet, showing it to him. 26 months ago, you started legitimizing the business, selling off questionable assets, moving toward legal operations, cutting ties with the old families. The timeline matches exactly. Dominic stared at the data, realization dawning. He didn't want out of the life. He wanted to stay in it. And when you started going legitimate, he saw it as weakness, as betrayal of your father's legacy. Elena set down the tablet. So he decided to take what he thought he deserved and build his own empire the old way. $3 billion to fund a criminal organization while I go to prison for the crimes he's committed in my name. Dominic's laugh was bitter. It's brilliant, actually. Ruthless and brilliant. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the snow. Elena had never been comfortable with quiet before. It always felt like pressure to fill the space with words. But with Dominic, especially in these late-night moments, the silence felt different. Companionable. I've been thinking, Elena said finally, about what you said that first night. About me looking terrified. I was an asshole that night, Dominic said immediately. I'm sorry for... No, you were right. Elena turned to face him. I was terrified. I'm always terrified of people, of confrontation, of being seen. I've spent my whole life hiding behind screens because the real world is too loud and scary and unpredictable. And now I'm still terrified, Elena admitted. But I'm here anyway, living in a mansion with a man who runs a criminal empire, hacking into federal databases, helping plan a war against a traitor who'd probably kill me if he had the chance. And somehow, she paused, trying to find the right words. Somehow I'm less anxious than I've been in years. Dominic studied her face, and Elena forced herself not to look away. Why do you think that is? Because the code doesn't scare me. The problems we're solving, they're just puzzles. Complicated, dangerous puzzles, but still logical. And you, she hesitated. You don't treat me like I'm broken anymore. Like my anxiety is something I need to apologize for. You're the least broken person I know, Dominic said quietly. You see patterns no one else sees. You solve problems that would take my best people weeks to even understand. You walked into a room full of dangerous men and kept your composure even when we treated you like garbage. He smiled slightly. You're not a mouse, Elena. You're a goddamn hawk. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. I've been called a lot of things, that's a new one. Get used to it. Dominic moved back to his desk, the moment passing. Because I need that hawk mind of yours to figure out Marco's timeline. When is he making his move? Elena returned to her laptop, pulling up a calendar. Based on his communication patterns with the federal prosecutors, I think he's aiming for early December. There's a pattern to when he sends information. Always on Wednesdays. Always late at night. The next Wednesday is December 4th. If he follows the pattern, that's when he'll deliver the final evidence package. 9 days. Dominic calculated. We have 9 days to secure the rest of the assets, isolate his supporters, and build our own case. Can we do it? We have to. Dominic pulled up a list of names on one of his monitors. I've identified 15 people in the organization who I think are loyal to Marco instead of me. Vincent has been watching them, documenting their movements. We'll need to move them all at once. If any of them warn Marco, he'll accelerate his timeline. Elena looked at the list, recognizing some of the names from the network activity logs. What about going to the FBI ourselves? Show them Marco's theft, his manipulation of evidence, and tell them what? That I'm a reformed criminal whose CFO is framing me for crimes I'm actually guilty of? Dominic shook his head. The moment the feds get involved, we all go down. Marco, me, probably you for hacking half the databases on the eastern seaboard. So what's the plan? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk. We give Marco what he wants. Let him think he's won. I don't understand. Marco expects me to fight back the old way, with violence, intimidation, the methods my father used. But that's not who I am anymore. And you know why? He looked at Elena with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because you showed me a different way. You proved that intelligence beats brutality every time. So we're going to beat Marco at his own game. Elena leaned forward. How? By doing exactly what you've been doing. Following the money, documenting everything, building an airtight case. But not for the FBI. For Marco's own investors. Understanding dawned on Elena's face. The people he's been stealing from to fund his new empire. Exactly. Marco didn't just steal from me. He stole from the pension funds he was supposed to be managing, from the legitimate businesses he was supposed to be protecting. Those people might not care about my legal troubles, but they'll care a lot about their missing money. Dominic pulled up a new file. You can trace every dollar back to its source, right? Show exactly who Marco stole from? I can build a complete financial map, Elena confirmed. Every theft, every fraudulent transaction, every hidden account. Make it so detailed that even a non-technical person could follow the trail. Then that's what we do. We expose Marco not as a witness against me, but as a thief who betrayed everyone he was supposed to protect. His federal deal won't save him when the families find out he stole their retirement money. Elena felt a chill despite the warm room. Dominic, if you expose him to the families, he signed his own death warrant when he stole from them. Dominic said flatly, I'm just making sure they can read the signature. It was a death sentence, Elena knew. Not delivered by Dominic's hand, but by his revelation of the truth. She thought about objecting, about arguing for a different solution. But then she remembered her ransacked apartment, the $3 billion stolen through code, the federal case being built on lies and manipulation. Marco had made his choices. Now he would face the consequences. I'll need access to Marco's personal financial records, Elena said. His real ones, not the sanitized versions he shows the organization. Can you get them? Elena smiled. Not her usual nervous smile, but something sharper. Mr. Caruso, I've hacked into the Singapore Monetary Authority, the Cayman Islands Banking Commission, and the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority in the past 3 weeks. Marco's personal accounts will take me maybe 2 hours. Dominic, he corrected gently. And I never doubted you for a second, Elena. They worked through the night, as they had so many nights before, but this time felt different. Like pieces finally clicking into place. Elena mapped financial networks while Dominic made calls, pulling in favors, positioning assets, preparing for the endgame. Around 3 a.m., Elena stretched, her back protesting from hours in the chair. I need coffee, and probably food. I can't remember if I ate dinner. You didn't, Dominic said. I had the chef leave sandwiches in the kitchen. Come on. They walked through the quiet mansion, their footsteps echoing on marble floors. The kitchen was enormous, all stainless steel and granite countertops. Dominic pulled out a plate of sandwiches from the refrigerator, while Elena started the commercial-grade espresso machine. You know what's funny? Elena said, as she waited for the coffee to brew. 3 weeks ago, I couldn't imagine anything scarier than walking into a room full of strangers. Now I'm planning the takedown of a criminal CFO and living with someone who terrified me. Do I still terrify you? Dominic asked, taking a bite of his sandwich. Elena considered the question honestly. No. Now you're just Dominic, the guy who drinks too much coffee, works too late, and has a tell when he's bluffing about understanding technical things. I do not have a tell. You tap your pen 3 times on the desk when you're pretending to follow the code. Elena grinned at his surprised expression. I'm observant, it's kind of my thing. Apparently. Dominic studied her face, and Elena noticed he was standing closer than necessary in the large kitchen. You've changed too, you know. That first night you could barely look at me. Now you call me out when I'm bullshitting you. Turns out it's easier to be brave when the stakes are this high, Elena said softly. When I'm doing something that matters instead of just hiding from the world. You matter, Elena. Not just what you do. You. Dominic's voice dropped lower. I need you to know that. When this is over, when Marco's dealt with and things go back to normal, what is normal for you? Elena interrupted, genuinely curious. After all this? You said you wanted to go legitimate, but what does that actually look like? Dominic leaned against the counter thinking, my father built an empire on fear and violence. I inherited it because I didn't know how to refuse, didn't know there was another option. But these past weeks working with you, solving problems with intelligence instead of intimidation, he met her eyes. That's the version of myself I want to be. Someone who builds things instead of taking them. Someone who... His phone rang, shattering the moment. Dominic checked the screen and his expression hardened. It's Vincent. He wouldn't call at 3 a.m. unless... He answered. What's wrong? Elena couldn't hear Vincent's response, but she watched Dominic's face go from concerned to furious. When? How many? A pause. No, don't engage. Pull everyone back to the secondary location. I'm on my way. He hung up and grabbed his coat. Marco made his move. He just withdrew $400 million from accounts we hadn't secured yet and transferred them overseas. Vincent says our people at the port saw Marco's men loading containers onto a ship. Looks like he's moving physical assets too. He knows we're onto him, Elena said, her mind racing. Something tipped him off. Or he's on his own timeline and we're out of time. Dominic headed for the door, then stopped. Stay here. Tony and Michael are outside. Don't open the door for anyone else. Wait. Elena grabbed her laptop. If Marco's moving money, I can track it. See where it's going, maybe even freeze some of the transfers. Elena, if Marco's men are at the port, then you need me there to trace the digital trail in real time. Elena pulled on her coat, her fear buried under determination. You said it yourself. Intelligence beats brutality. Let me do what I do best. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Stay close to me. Don't take risks. If shooting starts, I know. Duck and cover. Not a hero. Elena managed a shaky smile. Let's go catch a traitor. The drive into the city was tense and silent. Snow falling heavier now, coating the roads. Elena worked on her laptop the entire way, tracking Marco's money as it bounced between accounts, each transfer bringing her closer to understanding his escape route. He's heading to Brazil, she said as they crossed the Verrazano Bridge, the lights of the port visible ahead. No extradition treaty with the U.S. He's got accounts set up in Sao Paulo, property in Rio. This isn't just about stealing money. He's planned his entire exit strategy. Not if we stop him first, Dominic said grimly. The port was a maze of shipping containers and industrial equipment, poorly lit and eerily quiet at this hour. Vincent met them at the entrance with 2 cars full of Dominic's men. They're at Dock 17, Vincent reported. 4 of Marco's guys loading containers onto the Meridian Star, registered in Panama, scheduled to depart at 6 a.m. Marco's not here personally, but he doesn't need to be, Elena said, staring at her laptop screen. He's controlling everything remotely. Look, he's making transfers right now from a location in Midtown, the office. He's at the office. Dominic and Vincent exchanged looks. It's a trap, Vincent said. He's dividing our forces. We go to the office. His men finish loading the ship. We stay here. He escapes with the money. Then we split up, Dominic decided. Vincent, you handle the port. I'll take Elena to the office. We need to stop both, the money and the man. As they drove toward Manhattan, Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard, building a digital cage around Marco's accounts. Every transfer he made, she traced. Every account he accessed, she logged. By the time they reached Dominic's building, she had mapped his entire escape plan. I can lock him out, she said, as they rode the elevator to the 43rd floor. Cut his access to everything. But he'll know we're here the second I do it. Do it anyway, Dominic said. I want him to know. I want him to see us coming. The elevator doors opened to darkness. The office was silent, but light spilled from under Dominic's office door. Elena executed her code. Every screen in the building would show the same message. Access denied. She imagined Marco's face as his carefully planned escape crumbled in seconds. The office door opened. Marco Tesoro stood silhouetted in the doorway, a distinguished man in his 60s. Gray hair perfectly styled, expensive suit immaculate. He looked every inch the loyal CFO, right down to his sad smile. Dominic, he said quietly, I wondered when you'd figure it out. And you brought the little programmer. Of course you did. He looked at Elena with something like respect. You're better than I expected. I didn't think anyone could trace my work. You made mistakes, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Small ones, but I found them. Clearly, Marco gestured to the office. Shall we discuss this like civilized people? Or are we doing this the old-fashioned way? That depends on you, Dominic said, his hand resting inside his coat. On a gun, Elena realized. The accounts are frozen. The ship isn't leaving port. It's over, Marco. Is it? Marco's smile widened. You think you've won? Dominic, I've spent 26 months building this. You've frozen some accounts, stopped one shipment. I have contingencies you haven't even imagined. We know about the federal deal, Elena said. The evidence you're compiling. But what you don't know is that we've built our own case. Every dollar you stole traced back to its source. The families know, Marco. They know you robbed them. For the first time, Marco's confidence flickered. You wouldn't. I already did, Dominic said. You wanted war? You've got it. But you forgot something important. I learned from my mistakes. I learned to fight smarter, not harder. And I learned that from her. He nodded toward Elena, and she felt a surge of pride despite the danger. Marco's expression hardened. Then I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. Everything happened fast. Marco moved backward, reaching for something. Dominic drew his gun. Elena dropped to the floor, her laptop skidding across the marble. But Marco didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a phone and pressed a button. If I can't have it, Marco said calmly, neither can you. The files are uploading to the FBI as we speak. Every crime your father committed, every dirty deal you inherited, by morning you'll be in federal custody. Elena's mind raced. Federal upload meant a secure connection. Probably encrypted, definitely. She grabbed her laptop from the floor, ignoring Dominic's shout to stay down. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the data stream, finding the upload in progress. I can stop it, she said. But I need 60 seconds. You don't have 60 seconds, Marco laughed. The upload is at 70%. Face it, you lose. Elena tuned him out, diving into the code. She'd hacked federal databases before. She could do this. She had to do this. 30 seconds. The upload hit 80%. Her screen filled with code, her world narrowing to logic and syntax. Find the vulnerability, exploit it, shut it down. 45 seconds, 90% uploaded. There, a buffer overflow in the authentication protocol. She could inject code, force a disconnect, corrupt the upload. 58 seconds, 98%. Elena hit enter. The upload stalled. Error messages flooded the screen. Then, connection terminated. File corrupted. Upload failed. Elena looked up at Marco's shocked face. Your evidence is gone. Every file corrupted beyond recovery. For a moment, no one moved. Then Dominic's men flooded into the office. Vincent had arrived with backup. It's over, Marco, Dominic said quietly. You've got nothing left. Marco looked at Elena with genuine surprise. Who are you? Just a programmer, Elena said, closing her laptop. One you should never have underestimated. As Vincent's men took Marco into custody, Elena and Dominic stood by the windows watching dawn break over the city. You saved me, Dominic said softly. Again, we saved each other, Elena corrected. You gave me a reason to be brave. I gave you a different way to fight. Dominic took her hand, and this time Elena didn't pull away. The war wasn't quite over. But standing there watching the sun rise on a new day, Elena knew they'd already won the only battle that mattered, the one against their own limitations. Manhattan Federal Building, December 10th, 9 a.m. The FBI field office was nothing like Elena had imagined. She'd expected something from a crime drama. Stark interrogation rooms, fluorescent lights, agents in dark suits looking intimidating. Instead, she sat in a conference room that could have belonged to any corporate office, complete with a coffee station and motivational posters about teamwork. Special Agent Sarah Brennan sat across from her, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Next to her was Agent Chen, younger, taking notes on a tablet. Let me make sure I understand, Ms. Morse, Brennan said, reviewing the folder in front of her. You're here voluntarily to provide testimony about financial crimes committed by Marco Tesoro, former CFO of Caruso Enterprises. That's correct, Elena said. Her hands were folded on the table, not shaking for once. She'd rehearsed this conversation with Dominic and his lawyers for days. And you gained this information while working as a contracted IT consultant for Mr. Caruso's organization? Yes. I was hired to investigate network security issues. What I found was systematic embezzlement spanning 26 months. Elena pulled out a thumb drive. This contains complete documentation of every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, every offshore account Marco Tesoro used to steal $3.1 billion. Brennan exchanged a look with Chen. That's a significant accusation. You have proof? Digital forensic evidence, transaction records, email communications, access logs, everything needed to build an airtight case. Elena slid the drive across the table. I also have evidence that Mr. Tesoro was planning to provide false testimony against Dominic Caruso in exchange for immunity. The case he was building was fabricated using manipulated financial records. That's a serious allegation against a federal witness, Brennan said carefully. Which is why I'm here, Elena replied. I wanted you to have the truth before making any deals. Marco Tesoro isn't a whistleblower. He's a thief covering his tracks by framing his employer. Brennan took the thumb drive, turning it over in her hands. Why come to us? Why not let Mr. Caruso handle this? Internally, it was the question Elena had been expecting, the one that would determine everything. Because I believe in the law, Agent Brennan. I believe criminals should face justice through the legal system, not through violence. And I believe the truth matters more than loyalty. Even if that truth complicates things for your employer. Elena met her gaze steadily. The evidence I'm providing documents Marco Tesoro's crimes. It also clearly separates Dominic Caruso's legitimate business operations from anything questionable. I'm not here to protect anyone. I'm here to provide facts. Brennan studied her for a long moment. You realize this makes you a key witness in a major federal case. Your life is going to change considerably. It already has, Elena said quietly. Caruso headquarters. Same day, 2 p.m. The conference room was packed. Elena stood at the front with her laptop connected to a large screen facing 47 people. Every senior manager, department head, and team leader in Caruso Enterprises. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. This was the other part of her plan. The FBI would handle Marco's criminal prosecution, but the organization needed to understand what had happened and what was going to change. Thank you all for coming, Elena began, her voice stronger than it had been that first night months ago. I know many of you are confused about recent events. I'm going to explain exactly what Marco Tesoro did, how he did it, and what it means for this company going forward. She pulled up the first slide, a visualization of the theft network. 26 months ago, Marco Tesoro began systematically stealing from this organization. He used his access as CFO to create a parallel financial structure that siphoned money from every department, every deal, every transaction. The room erupted in whispers. Elena waited for them to quiet down. He was sophisticated about it. Small percentages that wouldn't trigger audits. False vendors, inflated expenses, currency exchange losses that never actually occurred. He made it look like normal business operations. She clicked through slides, showing the evidence. But over 26 months, those small thefts added up to $3.1 billion. That's impossible, someone said from the back. Our auditors would have caught that. Your auditors were looking at sanitized reports that Marco provided, Elena explained. He controlled the financial reporting systems. He knew exactly how to hide the theft in plain sight. She pulled up another slide. But he made mistakes, digital mistakes, and those mistakes left a trail. She walked them through it. Every piece of evidence, every hidden account, every fraudulent transaction. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Marco Tesoro is currently in federal custody, Dominic said, speaking for the first time. He'll be prosecuted for embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The FBI has all the evidence thanks to Ms. Morse's work. What about the money? Asked Patricia from accounting, a woman in her 50s who looked devastated. Can we recover it? Elena nodded. We've frozen approximately $1.7 billion in various accounts. The recovery process will take time. Marco moved money through multiple jurisdictions, but yes, a significant portion can be recovered. What about the rest? Someone else asked. Gone, Elena admitted. Converted to cryptocurrency and distributed across thousands of wallets. Marco liquidated it before we could stop him. That money is effectively untraceable now. The room absorbed this sobering news. Which brings us to the future, Dominic said, standing up. Marco's betrayal has forced me to take a hard look at how this organization operates, and I've made some decisions. He walked to the front of the room, standing beside Elena. For years, this company has existed in a gray area, legitimate businesses mixed with questionable operations. My father built it that way, and I maintained it, because I didn't know how to change it. But Marco's theft showed me something important. You can't build something lasting on a foundation of secrets and crime. Elena watched the faces in the room, some surprised, some concerned, some relieved. Effective immediately, Caruso Enterprises is going fully legitimate, Dominic announced. We're divesting from any operations that can't withstand legal scrutiny. We're implementing new financial controls, independent audits, transparent reporting. We're becoming the kind of company that my children could be proud to inherit. What about the families? Asked Vincent quietly. The old alliances? They'll have to find someone else, Dominic said firmly. I'm done with that world. Anyone who wants to stay with this organization needs to be comfortable with that decision. Anyone who doesn't, I'll provide severance and references. No hard feelings. The meeting continued for another hour. Questions, concerns, logistics. Elena answered technical questions while Dominic handled the political ones. They worked together seamlessly, a partnership forged through crisis. As the room finally emptied, Dominic turned to Elena. That went better than I expected. Most of them seemed relieved, Elena observed, like they'd been waiting for permission to go straight. Maybe they had been. Dominic started gathering papers. The FBI meeting. How did it go? Agent Brennan took the evidence. She seemed cautiously interested. They'll investigate Marco independently, verify everything I provided. Elena hesitated. She asked a lot of questions about you. I'm sure she did. I told her the truth, that you hired me to fix network issues, that I discovered the theft, that you cooperated fully with documenting Marco's crimes. Elena met his eyes. I also made it clear that your legitimate businesses are completely separate from anything questionable. You protected me, Dominic said softly. I protected the truth, Elena corrected. There's a difference between what you inherited and what you choose to be. I made sure they understood that. Dominic's phone rang. His lawyer. He stepped away to take the call, leaving Elena alone in the conference room. She looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, thinking about how much had changed since that rainy October night. She wasn't invisible anymore, wasn't terrified of being seen. The shy programmer who couldn't make eye contact had just presented to a room full of strangers and commanded their attention. That was Davidson, Dominic said, returning. The federal prosecutor wants to meet. They're willing to grant me immunity in exchange for testimony about Marco's crimes and cooperation with their investigation. That's good news. It means the end of the old life. Completely. Dominic leaned against the table. No more protection from the families, no more friends in low places, just a legitimate businessman trying to rebuild. Is that what you want? Elena asked. Dominic looked at her. Really looked at her, the way he had that night in the Hamptons kitchen. 6 months ago I would have said no. This life was all I knew. But now, he smiled. Yeah, it's exactly what I want. Brooklyn, Elena's new apartment, December 15th. Elena's new place was in a better neighborhood with actual security and windows that locked properly. Dominic had insisted on paying for it. Hazard pay, he called it, though Elena suspected it was guilt over her old apartment being ransacked. She was setting up her home office when her phone rang. Unknown number, but a familiar area code. Hello? Ms. Morse? This is Agent Brennan. I wanted to update you on the case. Elena sat down at her desk. Of course. Based on the evidence you provided, we've charged Marco Tesoro with 47 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His lawyer is already talking about a plea deal, probably looking at 20 to 25 years federal time. And Dominic Caruso? Mr. Caruso has been cooperative. We see no reason to pursue charges related to Mr. Tesoro's fabricated evidence. However, Brennan paused. We will be investigating some of the historical operations of Caruso Enterprises. Nothing that involves you, but I wanted you to know. I understand, Elena said. Dominic expected that. One more thing. We'd like to hire you. As a consultant. Elena blinked in surprise. Excuse me? The way you trace Tesoro's digital footprint, your ability to analyze complex financial networks, the Bureau could use someone with your skills. We have dozens of cases involving cryptocurrency fraud, money laundering, cybercrime. You'd be perfect. I'll think about it, Elena managed. After hanging up, she stared at her phone in disbelief. The FBI wanted to hire her. 6 months ago, she could barely handle freelance work from home. Now federal agents were recruiting her. Her doorbell rang. Elena checked the security camera. Dominic, holding a bag from her favorite Thai restaurant. I come bearing food and news, he said when she opened the door. Good timing? Perfect timing, actually. I just got off the phone with Agent Brennan. They ate on her couch, Elena's 3 monitors casting familiar blue light across the room. Dominic told her about his meeting with the federal prosecutor, about the immunity deal that would close the door on his old life forever. They're requiring regular audits, Surprise inspections. The whole 9 yards, he said. But in exchange, clean slate. I can actually build something legitimate. How does it feel? Elena asked. Terrifying, Dominic admitted. I've never done anything completely legal before. What if I'm not good at it? Elena laughed. Says the man who built a multi-billion-dollar empire. I think you'll manage. With help, Dominic said, looking at her. Elena, I want you to come work for me, officially. Head of cybersecurity for Caruso Enterprises. Build a department, hire a team, make sure what happened with Marco never happens again. The FBI offered me a consulting position, Elena said. Dominic's face fell. Oh, well, that's a great opportunity. You should. I haven't decided yet, Elena interrupted. I'm considering both options, but there's something I need to know first. What's that? Elena set down her food, turning to face him fully. That night in the Hamptons, in the kitchen. You started to say something before Vincent called. About after this was over. Dominic was quiet for a moment. I was going to say that working with you these past months has been the best part of this entire nightmare. That you've changed how I see the world, how I see myself. That underestimating you was the biggest mistake I almost made. Almost. I corrected it pretty fast, Dominic said with a slight smile. You made sure of that. Elena felt her heart racing, but not with anxiety. With something else entirely. I've spent my whole life avoiding connections with people. It was safer, easier. But you, she struggled for words. You made me want to be brave. Not just with code, but with everything. You were always brave, Elena. You just needed a reason to show it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. If I take the job with you, Elena said carefully, it needs to be professional. Clear boundaries, proper structure. I won't be just the programmer who saved you. I'll be an executive with real authority. I wouldn't have it any other way. And if we ever wanted to explore something beyond professional, Elena felt her cheeks flush, but pushed through. It would have to be separate from work. Completely separate. Dominic's smile widened. Are you asking me out, Elena Morse? I'm establishing parameters for a potential future scenario, Elena said primly, then laughed at herself. Yes, I'm asking. But first, let me finish the FBI consultation and help you build the new security infrastructure. Get the professional foundation solid before we complicate things. That's very logical, Dominic said, moving slightly closer on the couch. Very you. Is that a yes? That's a definitely yes. With one condition. What's that? Stop calling me Mr. Caruso. We're way past that. Elena smiled. Okay, Dominic. JFK Airport. 6 months later. Elena checked her watch as she waited at the arrivals gate. Dominic's flight from Miami was running 15 minutes late. A meeting with investors for a new real estate development, all completely legal and boring, as he'd joked on the phone yesterday. In the 6 months since Marco's arrest, everything had changed. Caruso Enterprises was thriving as a legitimate corporation, with Elena's cybersecurity department preventing 3 attempted hacks and implementing industry-leading security protocols. She'd even been featured in a Wired article, the programmer who brought down $1 billion theft ring. She'd also done consulting work for the FBI, helping them crack 2 major cryptocurrency fraud cases. It turned out she was good at translating complex technical concepts for investigators who just needed to know if someone was guilty. But the biggest change was personal. Elena had learned that she didn't have to hide from the world. She just needed to engage with it on her own terms. She'd hired a team of programmers who understood her communication style, built systems instead of fighting fires, and discovered that leadership suited her when she could do it her way. And Dominic, well, that had been a revelation all its own. They'd waited 3 months before their first official date, dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant in the West Village, where they could talk without the weight of crisis hanging over them. Then more dinners, long walks through Central Park, quiet evenings at her apartment or his, learning each other outside the context of war and betrayal. It was different from anything Elena had experienced before. Easier. He understood her need for space, for quiet, for processing things internally before speaking. She understood his struggle to build something new, to prove he could be more than his father's legacy. There you are. Dominic's voice interrupted her thoughts. He appeared in the crowd, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, looking tired but happy. Sorry about the delay. Weather in Miami was a mess. How'd the meeting go? Elena asked as they walked toward baggage claim. They're in. Full funding for the development, plus they want to talk about 2 more projects. Dominic took her hand naturally, comfortably. Turns out being completely legal is actually good for business. Who knew? Everyone except you, apparently, Elena teased. They collected his bag and headed for the parking garage. It was early evening, the summer sun still bright, and Elena felt something she'd never expected to feel 6 months ago. Contentment. Not the absence of anxiety, but the presence of something strong enough to outweigh it. "There's something I want to show you," Dominic said as they reached her car. "Can we make a stop before heading home?" 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a building in Tribeca, a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a small "for sale" sign out front. "What's this?" Elena asked, as Dominic led her inside. The space was empty, echoing, filled with afternoon light. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, open layout with room for dozens of workstations. "Your new headquarters," Dominic said. "If you want it. I know you've been talking about expanding the cybersecurity division, maybe starting your own firm. This could be it. Elena Morse Security Consulting. Your company, your rules." Elena walked through the space, imagining it filled with her team, with the kind of work environment she'd always wanted, but never thought she could create. "Dominic, this must cost. Consider it an investment," he said. "I'm not trying to buy you or control you, but you've transformed my company, helped me become someone I'm proud to be. Let me help you build something of your own." Elena turned to face him, this man who'd gone from mocking her to believing in her to loving her, though neither of them had quite said those words yet. "And if my company sometimes consults for Caruso Enterprises, I'd insist on it. Nobody else gets my security infrastructure." Dominic walked over to join her by the windows. "But it would be a professional arrangement, proper contracts, market rates. You'd be a vendor, not an employee. Clear boundaries," Elena said, echoing their conversation from months ago. "The clearest." Dominic smiled. "So, what do you think?" Elena looked out at the city, the same city where she'd once hidden in a small apartment, afraid to be seen. Now she was standing in a space that could become her own empire, built on intelligence and courage instead of fear and secrets. "I think," she said slowly, "that 6 months ago, I never could have imagined this, any of this." "Is that a yes?" "That's a definitely yes." Elena turned to him, standing on her toes to kiss him. Still new enough to make her nervous, familiar enough to feel right. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You always believed in yourself," Dominic corrected. "You just needed someone to see past the anxiety to the brilliant, fierce, incredible person underneath." "The mouse became a hawk," Elena quoted his words from the Hamptons. "The hawk was always there. You just needed a reason to fly." Elena Morse Security Consulting. 3 months later, the office was everything Elena had imagined. 15 employees, all handpicked, all brilliant in their own ways. Custom-built servers, multiple secure networks, a wall of monitors displaying real-time security data from their various clients. Elena stood in her private office, glass walls so she could see her team but door she could close when she needed quiet, reviewing the latest contract. A Fortune 500 company wanted her firm to audit their entire financial network. The fee would cover her operating costs for 6 months. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. "Dinner tonight, there's something I want to ask you." Elena smiled, typing back, "Your place or mine? How about the restaurant where we had our first date?" Interesting. Dominic only suggested that place for important conversations. Elena felt a flutter of nerves, the good kind. "See you at 8, she replied. That evening, Elena stood in front of her closet, actually caring about what she wore for the first time in her life. She settled on a simple blue dress, let her hair down instead of pulling it back, even added minimal makeup. The restaurant was as she remembered, intimate, quiet, candles on every table. Dominic was already there, looking nervous in a way she rarely saw. "You look beautiful," he said as she sat down. "You look terrified," Elena observed. "What's wrong?" Dominic laughed. "Nothing's wrong. Everything is actually perfect, which is why I'm terrified." They ordered, made small talk about their respective businesses, but Elena could sense Dominic working up to something. Finally, over dessert, he took her hand. "Elena, when you walked into my office 9 months ago, I thought you were the least impressive person I'd ever met. Mousy, scared, barely able to speak above a whisper. Wow, this is romantic," Elena said dryly. "Wait." Dominic squeezed her hand. "What I didn't see was that you were observing everything. analyzing, already 10 steps ahead of everyone in the room. You saw patterns we'd missed for years. You solved problems we didn't even know we had. You changed my entire life, my entire future, in a matter of weeks. You changed mine too, Elena said softly. I know we've only been together for a few months. I know by normal standards this is fast, but nothing about us has been normal. Dominic paused. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet, but I'm asking if you can see a future where that would make sense. Where we build something together not just as business partners or dating, but as actual partners in everything. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears, she realized with surprise. I spent my whole life avoiding commitment because it meant being vulnerable, being seen. But with you, being seen isn't scary anymore. It's freeing. Is that a yes? That's a, let's keep building toward it, Elena said. Let's see where this goes without rushing, but knowing we're both aiming for the same destination. Dominic raised his wineglass. To the future, then. Whatever it holds. To underestimating people being the most expensive mistake of all, Elena added, clinking her glass against his. They drank to new beginnings, to second chances, to the unlikely partnership between a mafia boss trying to go legitimate and a shy programmer who found her courage in code. Outside the restaurant, snow began to fall, the first of the season, covering the city in white. Elena and Dominic stood on the sidewalk watching it come down. Do you ever think about that first night? Dominic asked. How differently it could have gone. Sometimes, Elena admitted. If I'd been less scared, I might have walked out. If you'd been less of an asshole, I might not have been motivated to prove myself. If Marco had been smarter about covering his digital tracks. We got lucky, Dominic finished. No, Elena corrected. We got smart. We chose to trust each other when we had every reason not to. We chose to fight with intelligence instead of violence. We chose to become better versions of ourselves. Dominic pulled her closer and Elena leaned into him without hesitation. No anxiety, no fear, just certainty. The mouse and the boss, Dominic said with a smile. The hawk and the reformed criminal, Elena corrected. Get it right. Above them, the snow continued to fall, covering old mistakes and broken systems with something clean and new. In a city of 8 million people, two unlikely allies had found something rare, a partnership built on respect, trust, and the shared understanding that underestimating someone's quiet strength was the biggest mistake you could make. And as Elena looked up at Dominic, seeing not the dangerous man from that first night but the partner he'd become, she realized that being invisible had never been her weakness. It had been her superpower all along. She'd just needed the right circumstances and the right person to learn how to use it. Epilogue. 1 year later, New York Times business section, From Crisis to Success, How Caruso Enterprises Became a Model for Corporate Reform, by Sarah Mitchell. When Elena Morse discovered a $3 billion theft ring operating within Caruso Enterprises, few would have predicted it would lead to one of the most successful corporate transformations in recent history. Today, Caruso Enterprises stands as a fully legitimate corporation with transparent operations, industry-leading security protocols, and a reputation for ethical business practices. The company's revenue has increased 40% since going legitimate, proving that crime actually doesn't pay as well as honest business. Meanwhile, Elena Morse Security Consulting has become the go-to firm for financial institutions seeking to prevent internal fraud. With a client list including 5 Fortune 500 companies and 3 federal agencies, Morse has built her company on the principle that the best security is preventive, not reactive. People always ask if I regret how we met, Dominic Caruso said in a recent interview, referring to his partnership with Morse, both professional and personal, as the two announced their engagement last month. But the truth is, sometimes you need a crisis to show you who you really are and who you want to be. For Morse, who describes herself as just a programmer who happened to see patterns others missed, the journey from freelance contractor to cybersecurity entrepreneur has been transformative. I used to think my anxiety was a weakness, Morse said. That being quiet, being observant, processing things internally instead of speaking up immediately, these were flaws I needed to fix. But they're actually my strengths. They let me see details others overlook, patterns hidden in noise. As for Marco Tesoro, the architect of the massive theft, he was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison last month, with restitution ordered for the full $3.1 billion, though prosecutors acknowledge most of that money will never be recovered. This case changed how we think about internal fraud, said FBI Special Agent Sarah Brennan, who led the investigation. Tesaro's scheme was sophisticated enough to fool auditors for years. Without Ms. Morse's analysis, he might have gotten away with it entirely. The lesson, according to both Caruso and Morse: never underestimate the quiet person in the corner. They might be the most dangerous or valuable person in the room. The end.